For years, the president has been telling us he cannot resolve the immigration situation by executive order.
The problem is that, I'm the President of the United States. I'm not the Emperor of the United States. My job is to execute laws that are passed. The easy way out is to try to yell and pretend like I can do something by violating our laws. The notion that I can just suspend deportations through executive order, that's just not the case.
And yet, we know today he apparently has a very different view of his powers. Asked about his apparent 180 in position, the president late yesterday claimed he has not contradicted himself at all.
Well, actually, my position hasn't changed. When I was talking to the advocates, their interest was in me, through executive action, duplicating the legislation that was stalled in Congress and getting a comprehensive deal of the sort that is in the Senate legislation, for example, does extend beyond my legal authorities. There are certain things I cannot do.
And yet his earlier statements make perfectly clear no one was asking him to enact the entire stalled Senate bill with just the stroke of his pen. And the president repeatedly was very specific. It wasn't just, oh, I can't pass a law by myself. It was, I cannot just suspend deportation. I don't have the power to do that. Well, guess what he's about to do? Still, with 2 years to go in office and having done nothing to advance this cause when his party controlled both houses of Congress, the president now says he is tired of waiting for Congress to do what he wants them to do.
You are absolutely right that the very nature of an executive action means that a future president could reverse those actions. That's why I showed extraordinary patience with Congress in trying to work a bipartisan deal. But as I've said before, I can't wait in perpetuity when I have authorities that, at least for the next 2 years, can improve the system.
What happened to I'm not emperor? Joining me now, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. I mean, it is a clear 180. And the attempt to now say, oh, I was only speaking to those who wanted me with the stroke of my pen to just enact the entire stalled Senate bill is a straw man. That's not what they were pushing him to do. They wanted him to suspend deportations. That's what he's about to do.
When he suspends deportations and when he imposes his own conditions on those suspensions, he's effectively rewriting the law, and that violates his oath to enforce and uphold the law as it's been written. The American people, the Congress, and the courts need to know that we have a president who will enforce the law. When he says, I will not enforce the law because I don't like it or because I'm impatient, that doesn't wash under the Constitution.
Is there an exception in the Constitution to, you know, the separation of powers says, but what if you get really, really irritated? What if the Congress is a do-nothing Congress that stops your whole agenda? Then do I get to be emperor?
It almost sounds as if he believes that, especially in light of the tapes that you just ran, which correctly stated the law. He can't rewrite the law. Look, all presidents have some discretion. We call it, as you know, prosecutorial discretion. He can suspend some prosecutions because he wants to reallocate resources. But he cannot suspend a statute. And if he suspends the prosecutions of 5 million human beings under certain conditions that he made up, he is effectively rewriting the statute, and the effect of his exercise of his discretion is the opposite of what the law commands.
Okay, but when do we get to that point? Because he, in that same speech he gave yesterday, said, well, he basically, his new defense is all the kids are doing it. All the presidents are doing it. He talks about executive orders. He talked about Reagan. He talked about Bush 41 saying they've all done it. There's no problem with me doing it.
Every president since Dwight D. Eisenhower has suspended some deportations. President Reagan did it to 100,000 families. He did it on the basis of the 1986 statute enacted by the Congress. President George H.W. Bush did it for 1.5 million people. Only about 350,000 took advantage of it. And again, it was based on his interpretation of the statute. President Obama does not reinterpret a statute. He takes a statute and says, I'm going to disregard it. I'm going to give you a better one. I'm going to set down a standard, a set of standards that I would have written had I been been the lawmaker. He's not the lawmaker.
Right.
He's the law enforcer.
And he already did what President Bush the elder did in giving basically deferred deportation or suspended deportation to 1.8 Dreamers, the kids who were brought here early. He already did that.
Yes.
And they didn't impeach him. They didn't shut down the government over that. So he got away with that. But now he's raising the stakes to another 5 million. And at what point does he cross the clear line from discretion to completely ignoring his executive obligations to enforce the law?
When he grossly abuses his discretion, and when the effect of his discretion is to suspend a statute or to have the opposite effect of what the statute commands, that is a gross abuse. He will be playing with constitutional fire if he does this.
I want to ask you why people should care, because for me, this is not about how you feel about the 11 million illegal immigrants living in this country, whether you want them to have, quote, amnesty or not. It's about executive power. But I want to get your take on it, because I asked liberal law professor Jonathan Turley, who on other issues, on Obamacare, has been jumping up and down about the president and his executive overreach, is saying that we are headed toward emperor. We are headed toward king. I asked him about why it matters the other night. This is what he said. I want to get your thoughts.
Okay.
What the president is suggesting is tearing at the very fabric of the Constitution. We have a separation of powers that gives us balance. And that doesn't protect the branches. It's not there to protect the executive branch or legislative branch. It's to protect liberty. It's to keep any branch from assuming so much control that they become a threat to liberty. The American people have got to force this issue and say, look, we may agree with you on what you're trying to do, but we don't agree how you're trying to do it.
Well, I fully agree with Professor Turley. Put aside what's in the president's heart. It may be a humanitarian notion, which is laudable. His oath is not to his heart. His oath is to the Constitution. If he assumes so much power that he can blanketly refuse to enforce statutes he's sworn to uphold, then we all lose liberty, because then he becomes, I hate to use this phrase, but it's true, he becomes a prince. And future presidents will rely on this behavior if he gets away with it.
And it was never meant to be that the executive was going to be the most powerful of all the three branches, who could overrule the Congress because he's irritated and he's impatient. And they've told him, the people's representatives, those folks in the U.S. House were elected, they've told him no. They've given him an answer.
You're exactly correct. So then the question becomes, what will Congress do? Let's say Congress overrides these. Let's say Congress nullifies these executive privileges. He vetoes the nullification. They override his veto. How do they know that he would enforce any new laws that they passed?
Right.
He won't enforce these laws that were on the books from before he became president.
These aren't the amorphous, you know, congressional representatives who have this low approval rating. They are there as individuals to represent the people. They are the people's voice, and the people thus far, as a group, have said no to this bill, to this move, and he, with the stroke of his pen, is overruling them.
That's why I say he will be playing with constitutional fire if this happens, and we don't know where it's going to end. But we will be in for a 25-month period of constitutional crisis and stalemate, precipitated by the president assuming powers the Constitution doesn't give him.